Yo, what's going on guys, Arekkz here, welcome back to another Division video, and in today's video, finally, it is time to show you guys my Firecrest build. I have been speaking about this and using it for quite some time, and I was going to do a video back in patch 1.4, but then the gear score increase was announced in patch 1.5, so I figured I would update it, and also include some of the new items that were added. Long story short, it's been a long time coming, but for those of you guys that wanted to see what I've been running with lately, then here it is. If you guys do enjoy this, then a like would be super appreciated, and also comment down below and let me know what builds you guys are currently running with. So, to begin with, just a bit of context before we get started, Firecrest was one of those sets that in the past was something you would often dismantle or sell without a second thought. It was a bit useless and it never really had a proper place, especially when it stacked up alongside the old Reclaimer set, you know, the one that was broken. However, in patch 1.4, when the team changed a lot of things, rebalanced sets, and gave some sets new abilities, Firecrest suddenly became interesting again, especially when paired with the Flame Turret, which was also something that people were starting to use a little bit more. And therein lies the reason behind this set. This was my chance to build something that was effective, whilst also being different and fun to use. So let's start by taking a look at my gear. On the weapon front, I'm using the Police MK17, one of the highest damage PvE marksman rifles right now, and it has Brutal and Cool Headed on it. The third perk is a throwaway one, unfortunately, but the main reason this is here is for when I am either fighting at range, or my turret is on cooldown, and as such I use it over the MDR. Speaking of which, that is my secondary option, the Urban MDR. Now this is a pretty interesting weapon. If you guys haven't seen my video on this, then I'll link it down below. This is of course what the blind rifle that was never actually added to the game ended up becoming. But the thing about the MDR is that its numbers are a little on the low side. Truth be told, I feel like it could do with a bit of a buff, either to its numbers or to its talent, but I'll leave that topic for another time. What you need to understand is that if you want to get the most out of this weapon, or just make it usable for that matter, then you really need to spec towards it. And while ordinarily that is not something that I would normally do for one weapon in particular, given that it synergizes very nicely with my Firecrest build, I decided to make it work. Also, having had a chance to actually try the blind rifle at E3, I have waited so long for it to get added to the game, so once I got my MDR, I was sure as hell going to make it work, or die trying. Anyway, as for the talent rolls, sadly my MDR had a pretty crappy roll when it dropped, so I managed to lose one of the bad talents in favour of Destructive, and the Unforgiving just remains, which isn't a bad talent, it's just not what I would have liked. But, above all else, the main reason I am using this weapon is because it deals 10% bonus damage against targets with status effects applied. And I'm pretty sure you can now see where this is going. Now turning our attention to the gear pieces, I'm running Barrett's Bulletproof Vest for the single reason that when one skill is on cooldown, I get a further 5% damage increase, and given that with this build I usually always have my turret out, I am very often able to benefit from this talent. And of course if things get hectic and I have to duck out, then the armor from the double skill cooldown is nice too. I'm also running a pair of Savage Gloves, and these have assault rifle damage on, which also helps bolster the MDR's somewhat low damage numbers. And finally, the 4-piece Firecrest gear set. 2-piece of course gives me the +3 incendiary grenade capacity, which is nice. 3-piece gives me the +50% flame turret range and 30% flame turret damage, which of course goes very nicely with my skill. And the 4-piece bonus means I do 15% increased damage against burning targets. So when you combine all of that together, I have the 10% damage bonus from the MDR for status effects, 5% from Barrett's Vest, and 15% from Firecrest. So stacked up, that gives me a pretty decent damage boost. And above all else, that allows the MDR to kill pretty quickly, which is something it otherwise wouldn't do if you were using it like any other weapon. Like, if you go and actually grab the MDR, and you don't make use of the talent, and you just run it like a normal weapon, the time to kill on that weapon is pretty slow. But if you do spec towards it, and you can actually make it work like in this build, then it can be pretty effective. As for my mods, most of mine are firearms with armor on and turret mods with a mixture of health and damage. The build itself is spec'd a bit more towards firearms, and truth be told I could do with a couple of better rolls, as my armor is a little bit on the low side, so right now it's a bit more of a glass cannon setup, but it still works and it's good for both solo and group play, and of course the turret helps keep enemies at bay, which kind of sort of counterbalances some of the squishy nature of the lower armor. And with that being said, with the equipment out of the way, let's now move on to skills. So this is pretty straightforward. I have First Aid with Overdose on, just for a better quality heal. I could of course run Booster Shot for the further damage increase, but when running solo, I personally prefer the security of Overdose. And of course the main event is the turret with the Dragon Breath mod. As for my signature skill, if I'm running solo, then I tend to take Recovery Link, but if I'm in a group, then Tactical Link for some extra damage. And finally, on the talent front, I run Adrenaline for the overheal on medkits, just a nice safety talent that I typically always carry in like all my builds. Tech Support, where killing a target with my skill deployed extends the active skill duration by 10%, nice for the turret. Precision, where headshotting a target pulses it, and that gives you the effect of a base pulse, so there's of course increased crit chance and crit damage, so especially when I'm using like the marksman rifle to get those headshots, that is of course a nice bonus. And finally, the most important talent is of course Wildfire. This is the talent where applying a burning effect to a target has a chance to spread that effect to targets within 10 meters. So of course, if you have enemies that are coming out of a door, you throw down a flame turret and then you burn one of them, chances are they're all going to set on fire. So very, very useful. Now, that is the setup. As for the way that it plays, it's pretty straightforward really. Place the turret somewhere between you and the enemy so that it catches them. Use the MDR whenever a target is on fire, and when the turret is on cooldown, you can then use the Police MK17 to A, refresh your skills, and B, dish out some good damage. It is a really fun build to play with, and if you guys ever get a chance to run a full team of Firecrest, each of whom has their own turret, it is absolutely hilarious. It's also pretty nice to run solo, which I've been testing out quite a bit recently. Flame Turret is great for CCing enemies. As mentioned, if they kind of group up or they come out of a doorway, then it's a great way to lock them in place, deal some nice damage, burn through a lot of the targets, and of course then if you need to evacuate, you can of course duck out. Plus, because NPCs tend to target your turret, if you are in a sticky situation, especially running solo, then sometimes just having the turret in the field draws their attention, which gives you a chance to get away should you need to. That being said, you do of course need to keep an eye on your turret because enemies do target it quite aggressively, but thanks to Cool-Headed and Marksman Rifle, then even if it does go down, you're never really going to be that far away from another turret. Now, if you were considering trying this out yourself and you were missing, say, the MDR or the vest, you could of course grab something like a G36 and a Reckless chest piece. In fact, the G36 would realistically be a better option here, as it's much more flexible than the MDR, and of course just has good all-round damage output, which would of course only be further amplified by the Firecrest combo, but as mentioned, it was sort of my personal aim to make this work with the MDR, hence my setup. Either way, that is pretty much it. That is the setup I've been running with lately. It's a lot of fun to play with. I've had a lot of success with it, both solo and in group play. So if you guys are looking for something a bit different to mess around with, consider giving it a shot. And if you enjoyed the video, then again, a like would be super appreciated. But thank you very much for watching. Take it easy. Catch you next time. Peace out.